Good afternoon, leaders. I hope you're doing well. I hope your weeks are going well. I wanted to take just a minute and talk to you about the next lesson in the story material. Um, that is the Last Supper. Now, the book uses the account of Luke in chapter 22. I would encourage you, as you're prepping, as you're reading into the material, I encourage you to look at the other gospel accounts as well. It's always fun to see what the other gospel writers found important to tell you differently than another, um, or something to say differently than another. So check those out, see what differences and similarities you can find. I want to talk real briefly on just a couple things. I want to honor your time and keep this brief. But this Last Supper account is very, very deep. It's a very rich account. We could talk for a long time. These groups, this discussion could go for a long time. There's a lot of different paths this could go down in your group, and I could talk to you for a long time, but I won't. I want to start with the idea, the thought that people in your groups might not really understand what Passover is. Right? As you start doing your research, you'll see that Jesus was asking the disciples to prepare a Passover feast. I want to encourage you not to assume that people know what that means. So take some time in your groups and just lay those foundational pieces of what that meant for Israel prior to leaving Egypt, prior to being freed from their bondage in Egypt. Without that piece, this idea that Jesus is the Passover lamb loses a vast amount of richness. So just a couple minutes of conversation and discussion over what Passover is could have some real awesome effects on how people understand this account or what Jesus is saying. Also, I encourage you to take a couple minutes and talk about Judas. Now, when we read about Judas and what Judas did, I know I have found myself thinking, oh, Judas is just the bad guy in the story. I rarely relate with Judas. I often find myself saying, I would never do anything like that. Yeah, he's just the bad guy. But I would encourage all of you and within your groups maybe to spend some time talking about Judas and what he did and how we sell out Jesus. Right? Obviously, there's a difference in the context and literally what Judas did, but I think we could all think about times that in our lives and in our routines we sell out Jesus for other things. So I think it's worth probably talking about Judas and trying to maybe identify what we can really take away from understanding Judas a little more. I would also encourage you to talk a little bit more in your groups about communion. If you have any questions about how we do communion here at Northridge or what that looks like or how it relates to the Last Supper, please let me know. But I think it's worth in the groups having conversations about how what we do is directly from the Last Supper. Now, I know it probably seems obvious, but again, let's not assume that people understand that. Let's take the opportunity to explain that that this is coming straight from, when Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me. That's why we do it. So if you have any questions about why we do what we do or how we do it or what that looks like here at Northridge, please let me know. I would also encourage you to think about this. Now, if you don't want to share this with your groups, that's fine, but I would encourage you as leaders to think about this, that the act of communion, the act of remembering what Jesus did doesn't have to be limited to just the time that we serve communion or that Pastor Doug serves communion here at Northridge. I would encourage you to think about what it might look like to break bread, as Jesus said, to break the bread as a family around the dinner table. Right? At the core level, communion is about remembering what Jesus did. I would encourage you to think about what that means to do that as a family around the dinner table. Also, I would encourage you to think about communion as a celebration. And I think communion sometimes gets pigeonholed into a somber, almost funeral-like atmosphere. But I would encourage you to think about and maybe talk with your groups about what it might look like to view communion as a celebration. right? We have the luxury of knowing how the story ends, that um, Jesus rises, he is resurrected, he's alive, right? We know how it ends. The disciples didn't. So maybe think about sharing some of those things with your group. If not, that's totally cool. You know your groups, and that's kind of a deeper thing. I definitely don't want to encourage you to go down rabbit holes that aren't beneficial to your group. So again, I want to encourage you. Uh, if you have any questions, any concerns, if you need any support, please let me know. If you have any suggestions for the material, or adding the material, or changing it, or format, or anything like that, please let me know. Don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you for everything that you do. You guys are awesome. Um, Lives change because of work like that you're doing. Uh, Whether you see it or not, the Spirit is using these groups and these discussions to grow people, to change lives. So be encouraged. I hope you have a great week. Thanks.